I want you to just picture something for a second, like really put yourself right in this scene.
Okay.
You are driving down a really dark, winding two-lane road. You're up in the White Mountains of New Hampshire, and it is a freezing February night, like the
Right.
kind of air that is so cold it physically hurts your lungs to take a breath.
Oh, yeah, that sharp, biting cold.
Exactly. So you're driving, and up ahead, your headlights sweep across this really sharp hairpin turn. And you see it. It's a dark sedan, just crunched into a snowbank, sitting at this weird sort of jagged angle in the ditch.
Right.
So you pull over, you step out into that freezing wind, and you offer a hand of help to this young woman who's standing near the wrecked car. But she refuses. She tells you, that she has already called for assistance.
Which, spoiler alert, we'll get into why that's so important later.
Right, right. So you drive a few minutes up the road to your house, you dial 911 just to be totally safe, and you wait. The police arrive roughly 3 to 4 minutes after that. But when those flashing blue lights hit that crashed car again, she is gone.
Just go.
Completely. There are no tracks leading off into the dense snow-covered woods, no footprints whatsoever. Just this empty car, the howling wind, and a mystery that is about to stretch across, well, more than 2 decades now.
It's just, a 21-year-old vanishes into thin air. In a window of time so impossibly brief, it almost defies the laws of physics,
Yeah.
because people do not simply evaporate. Yet, that is exactly what appeared to happen on February 9, 2004.
And that is the terrifying heart of the Maura Murray case. So for this deep dive, we've got some incredible source materials we're looking at. We have the official FBI files. We've got this really comprehensive October 2025 investigative retrospective from A&E, and a massive, highly detailed dossier compiled by private investigators over the last 21 years.
It's a lot of paper, a lot of data.
It is. But today, we aren't just tracing her footsteps or reading a timeline like a police blotter. We're looking at the psychology of a person who leaves a massive, screaming digital footprint right up until the exact second she just ceases to exist.
Which means our mission here is to systematically reconstruct those really baffling final days. Not just by looking at what she did, but by really interrogating why she did it.
Right.
We need to unpack the myriad of conflicting theories that have just rushed in to fill the vacuum of her absence. And crucially, we have to examine the profound psychological toll of what trauma therapists call ambiguous loss.
Which is such a powerful term.
It really is. It's that agonizing state of grief purgatory that her family remains trapped in today.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can debate the mechanics of how she vanished on a freezing road in New Hampshire, we have to look at the architecture of the person who got behind the wheel.
Who was Maura?
Exactly. When you go through her background, you don't see a reckless kid at all. You see a portrait of immense, almost suffocating promise. She was born May 4th, 1982, in Hanson, Massachusetts. She was the fourth of 5 kids in this incredibly tight-knit Irish Catholic family. And her resume, it's staggering.
It's intimidating, honestly.
Totally. She wasn't just a good student, she was a standout athlete. By 1998, as a high school sophomore, she finished 33rd in the entire country in the 2-mile category.
Wow.
33rd in the country. That requires a terrifying level of internal discipline.
It does, because, to rank 33rd nationally as a teenager means you are entirely optimizing your life for performance.
Right.
You are ignoring pain, you are constantly suppressing fatigue, and you are always prioritizing long-term goals over immediate comfort. That is a highly, highly specific psychological profile.
And that exact profile carried her straight to the United States Military Academy at West Point.
Which is no joke.
Not at all. And she wasn't just taking, general education classes there either. She was studying chemical engineering.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So for 3 semesters, she survived one of the most grueling academic and physical environments on the planet before transferring to UMass Amherst in early 2002 to study nursing.
And she excelled there, too, right?
Of course she did. At UMass, she's on the dean's list, she's working security at an art gallery on campus, and she's volunteering at a nursing home where her mom worked. Her sister Julie always said nursing was her calling because she had this deep, bottomless well of empathy. She loved making the elderly residents laugh. She was the ultimate caretaker.
Which is a beautiful trait. It really is. And we see this a lot, it carries a massive hidden tax.
Oh, so?
Well, when your entire identity is built around being the capable one,
Yeah.
The highly disciplined athlete, the West Point cadet, the compassionate nurse, admitting that you are struggling feels like a catastrophic failure of your own identity.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. I kept thinking about this in terms of the swan analogy. On the surface, the swan is gliding effortlessly across the lake looking perfect. But underneath the water, the legs are just paddling frantically to keep moving. How often do we see this specific profile, the high achieving, deeply empathetic caregiver, just suddenly crack under the weight of their own expectations?
We see it constantly.
Mhm.
It's actually a recognized pattern. High achievers, who are also empathetic caregivers, they often absorb the emotional weight of everyone around them. But simultaneously, they refuse to offload any of their own
They
burdens.
just take it all on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They're structurally designed to take on weight, but they have no mechanism for releasing it. And what is so unsettling here, when you look at the official documents trying to define who she was, is how quickly the foundation of objective reality starts to crumble, even on the most basic levels.
Yes. Okay, this absolutely blew my mind when I was reading the dossier. I am looking at the official FBI missing persons poster, right?
Right.
The document used by federal law enforcement to identify a human being. It lists her height at 5'7", weight around 120 to 125 pounds, light brown hair, dimples. But then you look at the eye color. The FBI poster lists her eyes as green-blue.
And yet, if you cross-reference that with the comprehensive local police dossier, the primary case file explicitly lists her eye color as brown.
How does that happen? Really, how does law enforcement fundamentally disagree on the biological reality of a missing person's eye color? It's not a subjective behavioral quirk, it's a physical fact.
It happens because human perception, even within institutional systems, is remarkably flawed.
Hmm.
Data gets transcribed incorrectly from a driver's license, or, a family member gives a description under extreme duress, and that error just gets baked into the official record forever.
That is so frustrating.
It is, but you're right to highlight it, because it perfectly foreshadows the entire case. If the primary investigative agencies cannot present a unified, objective fact about the color of her eyes, it serves as a massive warning sign. It tells us that as we move into the timeline of her disappearance, every single piece of evidence is going to be subjective, contradictory, and deeply fragmented.
And that fragmentation becomes highly visible, highly destructive in the 96 hours before the crash, because it's easy to say she was under pressure, but abstract pressure doesn't usually cause a top-tier nursing student to completely unravel.
Well-
We need to look at Thursday, February 5th, because this is where the cascade of crises actually begins.
Mysterious breakdown at the art gallery.
Exactly. It's 4 days before she vanishes. Maura is at her campus job, just sitting at the desk at the security gallery. She receives a phone call. And sometime after this call, her supervisor, Karen Mayup, walks in and finds Maura in a state that the reports describe as quasi-catatonic.
That is a very specific word choice.
Yeah, Mayota said Maura was just staring right past her, completely unresponsive, barely able to form words. Eventually, she just murmurs, "My sister."
Let's pause on that medical terminology for a second. Quasi-catatonic isn't just someone having a bad day or, crying at their desk.
Right.
Catatonia is a severe neuropsychiatric behavioral syndrome. It involves an inability to move normally, and it's often characterized by a complete lack of response to external stimuli. The brain is essentially executing an emergency shutdown sequence in response to an overwhelming emotional or psychological shock. So for a supervisor to use that specific descriptor means Moore was entirely detached from her physical reality in that moment.
And the explanation we get for this shutdown feels just incredibly inadequate. The dossier notes that her father, Fred, later explained that Maura's sister, Kathleen, had called her to vent about a, quote, monstrous fight she was having with her boyfriend.
Okay.
Now, I understand that hearing your sister is in distress is upsetting, but does a secondhand story about a domestic argument cause a West Point-trained athlete to go into a dissociative, catatonic state where she has to be physically escorted back to her dorm room? I just don't buy it.
Doesn't track.
The reaction is wildly disproportionate to the stated news.
I agree completely. And the investigators noted that exact discrepancy in the file. It explicitly states that what truly upset Maura during that call has never been definitively confirmed. When you see a disproportionate reaction like that, it usually means one of two things. Either the content of the phone call was far more traumatic than the family has disclosed, perhaps involving severe danger or deeply held secrets, or the phone call was merely the catalyst.
The straw that broke the camel's back?
Yes, it was the microscopic tap on the glass that was already under maximum tension. She had walled off the stress of her demanding nursing clinicals, the complexities of her long-distance relationship, the expectations of her family. And this call from her sister breached the containment. The walls came down, and the nervous system just flooded.
And instead of getting a chance to recover from that flood, the weekend arrives and the chaos accelerates exponentially. So we move to Saturday, February 7th. Her dad, Fred, drives down to Amherst to visit.
Right.
He is ostensibly there to help her car shop because her daily driver, it's a 1996 black Saturn SL2, is basically failing. It's smoking badly from the exhaust, struggling to run.
Which, if we connect this to the bigger picture, is a critical logistical detail.
Yeah.
The geography of her life was shrinking because her mobility was compromised.
Right. You feel trapped when your car is dying, so they hang out. And that evening, Maura borrows her dad's car, a newer Toyota Corolla, to go to a dorm party. Cut to 3:30 in the morning on Sunday, February 8th. Maura's driving back to her dad's motel, and she crashes his Corolla into a guardrail.
Oh, no.
Yeah, nearly $10,000 in damage. The car is effectively totaled.
And we really have to examine the environment of that crash. It's 3:30 a.m. after a college dorm party. And the file notes she was not given a breathalyzer test at the scene.
Which is astounding to me. A 21-year-old crashes a car at 3:30 a.m. in a college town, and the responding officer just writes it up as a standard accident.
It speaks to a different era of policing, certainly. Or, perhaps she was just incredibly composed despite the shock. But regardless of the sobriety aspects, the psychological impact is devastating.
Totally.
Remember the profile we built? She is the good daughter, the overachiever. Her father drives down specifically to help her buy a new car because hers is broken, and she repays him by destroying his vehicle in the middle of the night. The guilt would be absolutely consuming.
And her dad reportedly handled it well. He told her not to worry, that insurance would cover it. But you're right, the internal guilt doesn't care about insurance deductibles. And we know she was spiraling because at 4:49 a.m., so an hour after the crash, she uses her dad's cell phone to call her boyfriend, Bill Rausch.
Right.
Bill later told investigators that while he consoled her about the car, he felt an undeniable underlying tension. He sensed there was something else weighing heavily on her mind, completely separate from the twisted metal of the Corolla.
And this is exactly where the case shifts from a tragic human drama to a chilling digital mystery. Because what she is doing on her computer during this exact window of time reveals a terrifying level of compartmentalization.
Yes. The digital breadcrumbs from early Sunday morning. Let's look at the timestamps, because this is wild. At 3:32 a.m., this is literally minutes after she has smashed her dad's car into a guardrail.
Minutes.
She is back in her room, logging onto her computer, and she submits a nursing homework assignment. The dossier logs it as maternity clinical definitions.
If you want evidence of a mind under extreme stress, this is it. I mean, the ability to endure a high-impact physical car crash, navigate the police interaction, absorb the crushing guilt of destroying her father's property, and then immediately sit down to click submit on a maternity nursing assignment.
It's robotic.
That is not normal resilience. That is a survival-level compartmentalization. She is desperately trying to keep the architecture of her life standing while the foundation is actively dissolving beneath her.
But the architecture is failing, because while she's submitting that homework, the internet logs show she is simultaneously searching for driving directions. She is mapping routes to the Berkshires and to Burlington, Vermont at 3:30 in the morning.
The collision of those two actions is the key to understanding Monday. Submitting the homework is a desperate attempt to maintain the facade of the dutiful student. Searching for directions to Vermont is the authentic manifestation of a person who realizes they are trapped and needs an immediate escape hatch. It's cognitive dissonance in its purest form. She is playing the role of the person staying while actively planning the route of the person leaving.
Which brings us to Monday, February 9th, the day she vanishes. And this is where I really struggle, because her actions on this day are completely paradoxical. We transition from Maura reacting to bad circumstances to Maura initiating a highly calculated yet seemingly contradictory plan.
She moves from defense to offense.
Exactly. Let's track the morning moves. 3:15 a.m. on Monday. She's awake again, deep into MapQuest, searching for directions to the White Mountains in New Hampshire.
Okay.
Fast forward to 1:00 p.m., she sends an email to her boyfriend, Bill. The subject line is super casual. Hey, she writes, "I love you more, stud. I got your messages, but honestly, I didn't feel like talking to much of anyone. I promised to call today, though. Love you, Maura."
It's an interesting piece of communication, isn't it?
Very.
It's affectionate, I love you more, stud, but it's fundamentally evasive. It is designed to establish distance without triggering alarm bells. She's buying time.
And she needs that time because 24 minutes later, at 1:24 p.m., she executes a massive calculated lie. She emails her nursing professors and her clinical cohort. She states that there has been a death in the family and she will be out of town for an entire week.
A lie that the family leader confirmed was entirely fabricated. Everyone was alive and well.
Why that specific lie, though? Her sister Julie pointed out that it is the ultimate collegiate firewall. You cannot question a student who claims a death in the family.
Oh, absolutely not.
A professor isn't going to ask for a death certificate before granting an absence. It is a socially impenetrable excuse that guarantees you a block of unmonitored time.
But it's also a highly destructive lie.
Right.
Nursing clinicals are notoriously strict. Faking a death in the family to get out of rotations is the kind of ethical breach that could threaten her standing in the entire program if it was discovered. It shows a severe escalation in risk tolerance. She needed a week off so desperately that she was willing to gamble her academic career to get it.
Once she secures the time off, the afternoon logistics get really weird. At 2:05 p.m., she calls a toll-free number, 1-877-GO-STOW. It's a central booking line for hotels in Stowe, Vermont. But the system is reportedly down that day. The call lasts a few minutes, but no reservations are ever made.
Which is a terrifying logistical reality. She's planning to drive a failing car into the extreme winter environment of northern New England, and she does not have a bed secured for the night.
It gets worse. At 3:15 p.m., she pulls up to an ATM at the Big Y Plaza. The CCTV camera captures her. She's wearing a dark jacket, her hair is pulled up, she withdraws $280. And the dossier explicitly notes that this withdrawal essentially emptied her entire checking account.
Down to zero. Now, $280 in 2004 was decent walking around money, but it is unequivocally not start a new life under an assumed identity money.
No way.
It's enough to pay for gas, maybe some cheap motels, and food for maybe 4 or 5 days.
Right. And look at what she does with that cash immediately after. She walks over to Liquors 44. First, she cashes in 79 empty cans and bottles, retrieving a grand total of $3.95 in deposits.
Every penny counts.
Then, she spends about $40 of her freshly withdrawn cash on a highly specific stash of alcohol. She buys a bottle of Kahlua, a bottle of vodka, a small nip of Bailey's Irish Cream, and a 12-pack of Budweiser.
Let's dissect that purchase, because the specific items actually matter.
Yes, please, because to me that doesn't look like a standard college party run.
Exactly. When a 21-year-old college student is buying alcohol for a dorm party, they buy volume. They buy 30 racks of cheap beer or giant handles of bottom-shelf vodka.
Right, the cheap stuff.
They do not buy a single bottle of Kahlua and a tiny nip of Bailey's. Those are sipping drinks. They are comforting, high-sugar liqueurs, usually mixed with coffee in the morning or after dinner. Vodka is a heavy, efficient depressant. Budweiser provides sustained volume.
So what does that tell you?
This is not a party list. This is the grocery list of someone planning to hole up in a dark cabin for a long weekend, alone, to self-medicate. It suggests a desire for prolonged, isolated intoxication.
But wait, hold on, because I read that differently when I first went through the file. What if she wasn't alone? What if the diversity of that alcohol purchase, the beer versus the coffee liqueurs, suggests she was buying for two different palates?
Oh, interesting.
Two people, two different tastes. She could have been meeting someone up there.
It is a valid alternative hypothesis, and it is one that investigators have chased for years. But if we look at the financial constraint, she only has $280 to her name. Spending $40 on premium mixers for a secret rendezvous seems less likely than a person stocking up on their own personal comfort items for a solitary retreat. However, both interpretations highlight intent. She was preparing for a multi-day event.
And here is where the paradox hits its peak. She empties the bank account, buys the alcohol, packs her car. That sounds like someone fleeing forever. But at 4 p.m., she stalks at the Hadley police station. She physically walks in to pick up the duplicate accident report forms for the crash involving her dad's Corolla from the night before.
Wow.
And earlier in the day, she had emailed a classmate about returning some borrowed clothes. I mean, is this the behavior of someone fleeing a life or someone just desperately trying to hit the pause button for a few days?
It's the pause button. The contradiction is staggering, but it makes sense psychologically. If you are running away to start a new life, or if you are in such deep despair that you are planning to wander into the woods and never come back, you do not care about returning a borrowed sweater.
You definitely don't.
You certainly don't care about ensuring your father has the correct triplicate forms for his insurance claim. Those are the bureaucratic chores of a person who fully intends to come back on Monday and deal with the consequences of their life.
Which completely validates your theory that she was just overloaded.
Yes. The actions are entirely consistent with someone who is experiencing a localized psychological overload. She couldn't handle the next 24 hours in Amherst. She needed to escape the immediate geography of her failures, the damaged relationships, the demanding clinicals, the wrecked cars. The plan was almost certainly a 5-day retreat into the mountains to breathe, drink, sleep, and gather the mental armor required to return and face the music.
But she didn't get a 5-day retreat. She got a 2.5-hour drive into a nightmare.
Yeah.
Let's look at that drive. It's late afternoon. She packs her own car, the 1996 Saturn, that is known to be smoking from the exhaust. She throws in her nursing textbooks, her luggage, the alcohol, the MapQuest printouts. She hits the road, heading north out of Massachusetts into New Hampshire toward the White Mountains.
Into the cold.
We arrive at Route 112 in Haverhill, New Hampshire. It's deep evening now. The A&E article paints a grim picture of this road. It's rural, it's pitch black, it winds through the foothills with sharp, unpredictable hairpin turns. The temperature's plummeting, and at 7:27 p.m., the trajectory of Maura Murray's life violently stops.
The crash.
A local resident named Faith Westman, whose house sits near a sharp bend in Route 112, calls the Haverhill police. She reports hearing a loud thump and seeing a car off the road crunched into the snowbank near her property. It is Maura's Saturn. Faith tells dispatch she sees a figure moving around the vehicle. Interestingly, the dossier notes that Faith's husband later reported seeing what looked like a red glow near the car. Some thought it was a cigarette.
Though investigators later theorized that the red glow could simply have been the illumination of a cell phone screen as she desperately tried to find a signal or an interior dash light reflecting off her face. But that tiny detail, a red glow in the dark, is the kind of ambiguity that fuels decades of debate.
Right. And just a few minutes after the crash, we get the final confirmed interaction anyone on Earth ever has with Maura. A local school bus driver named Butch Atwood is finishing his route. He drives a massive school bus right up to the scene. He spots the wrecked Saturn, he stops, opens the door, and calls out to her.
And this is such a critical conversation.
The A&E retrospective details this perfectly. Atwood asks, "Are you okay?" Maura is shivering. She replies, "I'm just shook up." Atwood, being a decent local guy, says, "Look, I'll call the police for you." And Maura immediately panics. She pleads with him, "No, please don't. I already called AAA. They're sending a tow truck."
And what's fascinating here is this interaction is the hinge upon which the entire mystery turns. Because Atwood knows instantly, without a shadow of a doubt, that she is lying to his face.
Because of the cell service.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We have to contextualize the technology of 2004. We aren't talking about modern 5G networks that can penetrate forests. Cellular networks in 2004 were largely 2G, relying on analog-digital hybrids that required relatively clear lines of sight to a tower.
Wow, so a total dead zone.
An absolute dead zone. Route 112 sits in a valley surrounded by the dense topographical occlusion of the White Mountains. A 2004-era Motorola or Nokia phone would display 0 bars. Atwood drove that exact route every single day. He knew the cellular geography intimately. It was physically impossible for her to have called AAA.
So why the blatant lie? If you are a 21-year-old woman alone on a freezing, pitch-black road with a wrecked car and a seemingly friendly local offers to call the cops to get you warm and safe, why do you desperately lie to stop him?
You lie because the police represent a threat far greater than the freezing temperatures.
Wow.
Let's look at the private investigator notes from Lou Barry. Barry points out a terrifying convergence of facts. First, it is highly probable that Maura had a suspended New Hampshire driver's license due to an unpaid speeding ticket from a previous trip. Second, she had just purchased a massive amount of alcohol, and when police eventually searched the car, they found an open bottle of wine and liquid splashed on the interior.
Wait, really? So she might have been drinking while driving?
Exactly. Or at the very least, she had open containers in the car after just crashing. Now, put yourself in her panicked, overloaded brain. You crashed your dad's car 48 hours ago. Now you've crashed your own car. You are in a state you aren't supposed to be in. Your license might be suspended. And you smell like alcohol.
That is a nightmare scenario for a nursing student.
If the police arrive, she isn't just getting a tow truck. She is getting a breathalyzer, a pair of handcuffs, and a DUI charge that will permanently destroy her nursing career. The lie to Atwood was a desperate, adrenaline-fueled attempt to buy herself time to abandon the vehicle before law enforcement arrived.
But Atwood doesn't buy it. He leaves her by the car, drives the short distance up the hill to his own house, and at 7:42 p.m. he calls 911 anyway. He tells dispatch about the crash and notes the driver seemed shaken and possibly intoxicated.
And the clock starts ticking.
Yes. Now, listen to me very carefully, because this timeline is where the case transitions from a tragic accident into a terrifying impossibility. The window. Atwood calls 911 at 7:42 p.m. Dispatch radios Haverhill police officer Cecil Smith. Officer Smith is en route in his cruiser. The official police log clocks Officer Smith arriving at the scene at exactly 7:46 p.m.
4 minutes.
4 minutes. Between 7:42 when Atwood places the call and is looking down the road, and 7:46 when Officer Smith's headlights hit the Saturn. In that microscopic window of time, Maura Murray completely vanishes.
It's just unfathomable.
When Officer Smith approaches the car, the doors are locked. He looks inside. He sees her nursing books, the luggage, the duplicate accident forms from Massachusetts, the MapQuest printout for Stowe. He sees the alcohol, including the splashed wine. He notes a small smattering of blood on the driver's side airbag, indicating she likely struck her head against the steering wheel in the deploying bag.
Right.
But outside the car, nothing, no sign of physical struggle. And here's the physical detail that haunts this entire case. There were absolutely zero footprints in the snow leading away from the car into the woods.
The lack of footprints is the ultimate physical constraint of this mystery. We're talking about February in the White Mountains. The snowbanks on the side of the road were several feet high.
Right.
If she had panicked about the incoming police, climbed over the snowbank, and fled into the dense forest to hide, she would have left a deep, unmistakable, chaotic trail of post holes in the snow.
You can't levitate.
You cannot levitate. The absence of footprints dictates a singular, undeniable reality. She left the scene by walking or running along the dry, plowed asphalt of Route 112. And given the timeline of 3 to 4 minutes, a human being cannot run far enough down that road to evade the approaching police cruisers and the subsequent search radius.
Which means she got into another vehicle.
Yes. In a window of less than 240 seconds, on a desolate, dark road, a vehicle had to approach, stop, communicate with her, and drive away with her inside, entirely unseen by Atwood or the approaching Officer Smith. The statistical improbability of that timing is staggering.
But doesn't that contradict the timeline? Because if another car drove past, wouldn't Atwood or the Westmans have seen it?
You would think so.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. This is where the dossier introduces the most chilling anomaly of the entire 21-year saga. The witness known only as Witness A.
Oh boy. The Witness A anomaly.
I need to lay this out clearly because it completely shatters the official narrative. Witness A was a local woman driving home from work that night. She was driving along Route 112, and she passed the scene of the crash. Witness A explicitly reported seeing a police SUV, specifically an SUV adorned with the numbers 001, parked nose-to-nose with Maura's dark sedan.
A police vehicle already on scene.
Yes. But here is the terrifying part. Through cell phone records from her own drive, Witness A's timeline was corroborated. She drove past that nose-to-nose scene between 7:33 and 7:37 p.m.
Which is nearly 10 minutes before Officer Cecil Smith officially arrived at 7:46 p.m.
Exactly. Witness A sees a police SUV already intercepting the crashed car a full 9 minutes before the dispatched officer claims to arrive. And here's the kicker. Officer Cecil Smith was reportedly driving a 4x4 SUV that night, acting as the primary vehicle because of the weather.
So many questions.
Right, so we have to ask the terrifying questions. Who was driving that SUV at 7:35 p.m.? Was it Officer Smith arriving early and off the radio? And if so, what happened to Maura in those unlogged 10 minutes? Or was it someone else entirely, driving an official or decommissioned vehicle, who intercepted a vulnerable, intoxicated girl before the real police arrived? The identity and actions of whoever was in that vehicle have never been definitively explained by authorities, and it throws the entire chain of custody of the crime scene into absolute chaos.
It is the ultimate wild card. Nature abhors a vacuum, but human psychology abhors an unexplained timeline even more. When you have a geographic constraint like the lack of footprints, a temporal constraint of 4 minutes, and an anomaly like a phantom police SUV, it creates a super collider for speculation. This utter lack of physical reality is what forces investigators and the public to wander into the labyrinth of theories.
And we are going to walk through that labyrinth now. But before we do, I need to make a very clear, very strict disclaimer to you, the listener.
Very important.
As we unpack these theories, we are acting strictly as impartial reporters of the information contained in the official case files, the A&E retrospective, and the public statements made by law enforcement. We're going to discuss several theories that involve specific named individuals. We are not taking sides. We are not endorsing any accusations of guilt. Our goal is simply to help you understand the vast, often contradictory landscape of this mystery and how investigators attempt to build narratives when the physical evidence stops at the edge of the asphalt.
That is a crucial baseline. We are analyzing the architecture of the theories, not rendering verdicts.
Let's start with theories 1 and 5 from the dossier, which deal with the elements. The idea of voluntary flight or wandering off and succumbing to hypothermia. In the early days, the police leaned heavily into this. They looked at the search history, the emptied bank account, the alcohol, the death in the family lie, and they concluded she ran away to start over. Or, more grimly, that she panicked about the DUI, jogged down the road, cut into the woods miles away from the crash site, and froze to death.
From a purely logistical and environmental standpoint, the hypothermia theory holds a brutal logic. The White Mountain National Forest is a vast, unforgiving expanse of dense timber, steep ravines, and unpredictable weather. Professional, highly equipped hikers die in those woods in the summer.
Right.
A disoriented, concussed, potentially intoxicated young woman wearing jeans and a dark jacket in February would be incredibly vulnerable. In those temperatures, hypothermia induces confusion, lethargy, and eventually a phenomenon called paradoxical undressing, where the victim feels irrationally hot and sheds their clothes before dying.
It's a horrific thought.
It is. And the reality of that terrain is that a human body could theoretically remain undiscovered in a ravine or under a rock outcropping for decades, despite massive grid searches. The forest simply swallows things.
But the family has always completely rejected the wandered into the woods theory. And frankly, the physical evidence backs the family up. If you are a panicked girl fleeing a crash site, you don't casually jog 3 miles down a pitch-black, freezing highway before deciding to enter the woods. You duck into the tree line immediately to hide from the headlights. And we know she didn't do that because there were no footprints leading away.
Right.
Which brings us to theory 2, the crime of opportunity. The idea that she was abducted by a stranger. Private investigator Lou Berry firmly believes she was taken. His theory is that she was standing on the road, terrified of the police arriving. A car pulls up. The driver seems friendly, offers her a ride to a gas station or a motel to get her out of the cold. She accepts, thinking she's evading a DUI. Only when the door is locked does she realize she just got into the wrong car.
And the A&E piece details a highly specific, chilling lead that Barry investigated regarding this exact scenario.
Yes. Barry identified a specific drifter who lived off the grid in the area. Barry notes that this man is a complete ghost to the system. He believes the man never even paid into Social Security, lived transiently between New Hampshire and Maine, and would be in his 60s today.
And what makes this individual statistically relevant to the investigation is his documented history.
Right. Maura's sister, Julie, was reportedly mortified to learn that this specific off-grid drifter had a documented history of severe domestic violence. Furthermore, he had a prior known incident where he encountered another woman whose car was broken down on the side of a rural road. According to reports, he charmed her initially, offered help, but subsequently harmed her.
It is a near-perfect match for the vulnerability profile of Maura's situation on Route 112, a stranded, isolated motorist and a seemingly helpful stranger with a predatory history.
Barry formally passed all of this intelligence to the New Hampshire authorities. But when the A&E reporter pushed the New Hampshire Department of Justice spokesman, Michael Garrity, about this specific drifter, Garrity completely stonewalled. He issued a statement saying they declined to comment, quote, to protect the integrity of the investigative process. He warned that speculative disclosures could hinder their ability to pursue avenues objectively, so that entire lead is currently shrouded in a wall of official silence.
Which is standard law enforcement procedure for an open cold case, but it leaves the public deeply unsatisfied. And when the stranger theory hits a wall of silence, investigators inevitably pivot to theory 3, the inner circle, the possibility of foul play by an acquaintance.
And again, delivering this with strict neutrality based purely on the dossier. The case file reveals an incredibly complex personal life that was largely hidden from her family. At the time of her disappearance, Maura was reportedly engaged in an affair with her track coach at UMass, a man named Hussein Baghdadi. The coach was interviewed by investigators, and he claimed that Maura had spoken to him about wanting to run away. He alleged she wanted to escape what she described to him as a highly controlling relationship with her primary boyfriend, Bill Rausch.
This revelation fundamentally alters the context of the trip. If she was fleeing a controlling dynamic, the Vermont trip is no longer just a retreat from academic stress. It becomes an act of evasion. Or, conversely, was she driving north to meet someone specific?
And the scrutiny on her boyfriend, Bill Rausch, has been intense and unrelenting over the years. Now, strictly speaking, regarding the night of February 9th, Rausch had a rock-solid geographic alibi. He was an Army lieutenant actively stationed at Fort Sill in Oklahoma.
Which is roughly 1,500 miles away from Haverhill, New Hampshire. Geographically, he could not have physically been on Route 112.
Right. But private investigators and online sleuths have heavily disputed the completeness of his alibi. They have analyzed his cell phone records from that night, noting strange gaps in roaming charges, questioning if he was truly on the base the entire time or if he could have deployed a surrogate. Furthermore, investigators found a printed email sitting on top of the packed boxes in Maura's dorm room. It was an email from Rausch, part of a contentious thread regarding his alleged infidelity with another woman. So there was undeniable friction, betrayal, and mistrust actively boiling in the relationship.
But friction in a relationship does not equate to murder. The geographic alibi is a massive physical constraint. The reason the public speculation continues to swirl around him, however, is due to subsequent historical events detailed in the file.
Yes, the dossier outlines events that happened years later. In 2011, Rausch was indicted on one count of felony third-degree sexual abuse regarding an alleged attack on a subordinate female employee in Washington, D.C. And the case file includes a truly horrifying allegation from another woman who claims Rausch physically assaulted her and told her, quote, "I'm going to kill you just like I killed Maura Murray."
And this is where we have to be incredibly careful about the difference between character evidence and physical evidence.
Absolutely. And I must forcefully state here on the record that Bill Rausch vehemently and categorically denies ever making that statement. He has consistently maintained his total, absolute innocence regarding Maura's disappearance, and he points directly to his Oklahoma military alibi as definitive proof that he could not have been involved.
When the physical trail ends at the edge of a snowy road, human nature forces us to map the emotional trail instead. We look for motive, we look for patterns of coercive control, we look for future bad acts. But emotional trails are inherently messy and subjective. They rarely provide the definitive forensic proof required to solve a crime.
Which is why Theory 6, the proximity mystery, is the one that actually keeps me up at night, because it relies purely on statistical geography.
The Breonna Maitland connection.
Yes, just 1 month after Maura vanishes. March 2004, a 17-year-old girl named Breonna Maitland finishes her shift at a restaurant in Montgomery, Vermont. She gets in her car, drives away, and vanishes. Her car is found the next day, abandoned, backed violently into an old, dilapidated farmhouse. And here is the terrifying detail. Montgomery, Vermont is just 66 miles away from where Maura's car was found in New Hampshire.
Let's look at the statistical probability of that. 2 young brunette women, both traveling alone in rural, freezing northern New England environments. Both involved in bizarre vehicle abandonments, both vanishing completely off the face of the earth without a single trace of physical evidence or a body ever being found, all occurring entirely within a 30-day window and within a 66-mile radius of each other.
The police have steadfastly, repeatedly denied any link between the two cases. They insist they are isolated, tragic incidents. But you look at the map, you look at the calendar, and you have to wonder, what are the odds of 2 lightning strikes that identical, that close together? It heavily bolsters the theory of a highly organized regional predator operating along the northern rural corridors in early 2004.
It is a maddening labyrinth. Every path you take ends in a brick wall. You follow the voluntary flight path and you hit the physical wall of the pristine snow, no footprints. You follow the abduction path and you hit the temporal wall of a microscopic 3-minute window. You follow the inner circle path and you hit the geographic wall of a military alibi in Oklahoma. The mind simply cannot reconcile the contradictory facts.
But while we sit here and debate the mechanics of timelines and alibis, we cannot forget the human collateral. Behind the digital sleuthing, behind the Reddit threads and the map analysis, there is a real family. A family that has been trapped in a state of suspended, agonizing animation for over 2 decades.
And this brings us to the psychological core of this entire deep dive. The crushing reality of ambiguous loss.
Let's talk about the family's fight because it is relentless. Start with her dad, Fred Murray. For 21 years, this man has waged an absolute war against the unknown. He has filed multiple lawsuits under New Hampshire's right-to-know law, desperately trying to pry unredacted records loose from the police. He fundamentally believes she was abducted and murdered by a local, and his desperation reached a peak in 2017.
The house search.
Yes. 13 years after she vanished, Fred received a tip about a house very close to the crash site on Route 112. He pushed for an independent search. They brought in ground-penetrating radar, which detected anomalies under the concrete basement floor. They brought in highly trained cadaver dogs, and the dogs repeatedly alerted to the exact same spot in that basement. Fred went on national television and said, "That's my daughter, I do believe."
Think about the psychological horror of that moment. A father is placing his ultimate hope in the scent alert of a cadaver dog. He is actively praying to find the decomposed remains of his own child, simply because the finality of a corpse is preferable to the torture of the unknown.
But they dug up the basement, they jackhammered the concrete, and they found absolutely nothing. Another phantom lead, another dead end.
Which violently forces the family right back to square one, with fresh trauma layered on top of the old.
And then you have her sister, Julie. Julie has taken this fight into the modern era. She realized that public attention is the only currency that forces police to keep working cold cases. So she launched a massive 10-part podcast series diving into every microscopic detail of the case. She built an enormous following on TikTok, over 320,000 followers. She uses the algorithm to keep Maura's face on the screens of a new generation.
It's incredible advocacy.
It is. But what breaks my heart is reading Julie's quotes in the A&E article about how her internal desires have degraded over the decades. She said that in the beginning, the goal was rescue. It was about finding Maura and bringing her home so they could have Thanksgiving dinner together again. But now it has morphed into just a somber, hollow desire to simply know the ending of the story. She says, "I've never once thought that I needed to be okay with never having an answer."
And this is where the trauma therapist interviewed by Amy Nguyen introduces a framework that I think perfectly encapsulates the Murray family's existence. Nguyen refers to this specific type of trauma as grief purgatory, which is rooted in Pauline Boss's psychological theory of ambiguous loss.
Grief purgatory. How does that differ from normal grieving?
It differs fundamentally in the brain's ability to process the event. When a loved one dies in a car crash or from an illness, there is a brutal physical reality to process. There is a body to identify. There is a funeral to plan. There is a headstone to visit. There is a definitive, undeniable end to the narrative. It is devastating, but that finality allows the cognitive grieving process to actually begin and move forward.
Right.
But ambiguous loss, when someone simply evaporates without a trace, denies the brain that necessary closure. The narrative never ends. It just pauses indefinitely. You are trapped in purgatory. You cannot mourn them entirely because there is no proof they are dead, but you cannot celebrate their life because they are not there.
If you're listening to this and trying to imagine what that feels like, think about the anxiety you feel when you are waiting for the result of a biopsy or waiting to hear back after a loved one goes into emergency surgery. That tight, suffocating panic in your chest while you pace the waiting room. Now take that exact feeling and stretch it out over 21 years.
That is exactly it. And Nguyen points out a deeply cruel paradox in these cases: the role of hope. Usually hope is a positive force, but in grief purgatory, hope is a torture device. On one hand, hope is the necessary fuel. It's what keeps Julie making TikToks and Fred filing lawsuits. It is the antidote to total despair.
But Julie explicitly says that hope tortures them.
Because every single day that ends without a phone call from the police is a fresh betrayal by that very same hope. You wake up every morning believing, maybe today is the day the hiker finds the backpack. Maybe today is the day someone confesses. And every night you go to sleep devastated that the silence remains intact. Hope becomes both the life raft keeping you afloat and the ocean slowly drowning you.
It is an agonizing existence. And the search hasn't stopped, even if the headlines have faded. The case today remains an active, open investigation. The FBI launched a dedicated, centralized tip page in 2019 to aggregate leads. There were renewed high-tech searches of the Route 112 area conducted as recently as 2021 using LiDAR and drone mapping. And just recently, in 2024, the FBI generated an age progression photo showing what Maura might look like today as a 41 or 42-year-old woman.
They're still trying.
They are. The New Hampshire Cold Case Unit still rigidly regards it as a suspicious missing persons case, continually refusing to release the unredacted files because they refuse to jeopardize future prosecutions. But despite all the radar, all the podcasts, and all the algorithms, the answers remain just out of reach. So what does this all mean? We've talked about timelines, car crashes, algorithms, and psychological shear. But I want you, listening right now, to really personalize this. Imagine waking up every single day for over 7,600 days. That is 21 years. Waking up every morning knowing with absolute certainty that the answer to your sister's fate, the reality of your daughter's final terrified moments, exists somewhere out there in the world. Someone knows, or some forest ravine holds the secret. but you cannot access it. It is a level of psychological endurance that is genuinely hard to fathom.
It is a profound testament to the family's resilience, but it also serves as a stark, chilling reminder of the ultimate vulnerability of the human condition. Despite our modern hubris, people can still simply be erased.
As we finally wrap up this deep dive into the dossier, let's briefly encapsulate the sheer, mind-bending improbability of this case. We have Maura Murray, a young woman of immense promise, buckling under invisible tensile stress. In the days before she vanishes, she leaves a massive, undeniably loud trail of breadcrumbs. We have timestamps of nursing homework, ATM CCTV footage, itemized receipts for specific bottles of alcohol, cell phone pings, MapQuest searches, fabricated emails to professors.
It's a mountain of data.
It is. The digital and financial trail is screaming at us. It leads us perfectly, chronologically, right up to a dark, winding road in the freezing foothills of the White Mountains. And then, in a microscopic window of just 3 to 4 minutes, the physical trail stops dead. She vanishes, leaving absolutely zero physical trace, no footprints, no body. The contrast between the deafening noise of her preparations and the absolute silence of her disappearance is what makes this case immortal.
It truly is the defining paradox of the mystery, and it leaves me with a final thought that I think builds on everything we've unpacked today. We live in an era where we fundamentally, arrogantly believe that technology sees everything. We believe our data tracks our objective reality. Maura Murray's case serves as a terrifying bridge between two distinct opposing worlds. On one side, we have the digital world, where every $280 ATM withdrawal, every 4.49 a.m. cell phone ping, and every late-night MapQuest search is recorded, stored, and analyzed forever. But on the other side, we have the natural world, the ancient, indifferent, unforgiving reality of the White Mountains, which proved it can still swallow a human being whole without leaving a single trace.
That's haunting.
And it begs a rather unsettling question for all of us to consider tonight. If you disappeared on your way home, would the digital breadcrumbs you left behind today, your search history, your texts, your credit card swipes tell the objective truth about where your life was heading? Or will they just be the ultimate misdirection, a frantic paddling beneath the surface while the real you slipped away into the dark?
Wow. That is going to stick with me for a long time. The idea that our data might just be the mask we leave behind. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the case files and the enduring mystery of Maura Murray's disappearance. I invite you to look at the people in your own life today, especially the ones who seem to be gliding effortlessly on the surface, holding up the weight of the world, and remember that there is always a complex, deeply human reality under immense tension just beneath the surface. Check in on them, take care of yourselves, and take care of each other.